public scenography can happen everywhere and anytime. Like Mahnorte, so these are memorial sites at a public bus stop in Berlin. So whenever you're waiting for a bus, you are just surrounded by a memorial. I think a very, very smart and effective way how to confront the people, how to intrigue the people with a memorial approach. And memorials don't need to be statues, sculptures, or monuments to attract our attention. It just could be a bronze cobblestone, so-called Stolperstein, a stumble stone, layered by Gunther Demenik. He's an artist, and he does this since 1992, and I don't know how many 10,000s of artificial cobblestone, memory stones, stumble stones he positioned all over Europe. For me, this is a monument. For me, this is a memorial. I have one just next door my house, featuring and worshipping to people that had been deported and killed by Nazi Germany. Actually, the right one is the initial contract Himmler signed to make the Holocaust possible. It was, by the way, his first Stolperstein Gunther Demnig positioned in Cologne. But at the end of the day, good scenography opens windows to secret worlds and is used on behalf of the recipients, on behalf of the addressees. It's us that we want to have a memorial. The memorial itself does not dare to be there. It's us that we want to set a sign and want to be interpreted in a certain way, even if it changes over the decades. But it's always about finding the consistent language and the adequate gesture. Because at the end of the day, I think it's the gesture that counts, and the interpretation comes with it. So this was the short excursion, and now the definition of scenography. Good scenography, I think, is a holistic, integrative, multidisciplinary, synesthetic, so all senses triggering, and content-consistent design philosophy. And most important, it combines logic and magic. Logic is the function, it has to function, and magic is something that happens to me, my awareness, my perception of it. 3 years ago, in 2015, the diploma topic of our students of scenography at the Basel University, where I'm a co-founder of an Institute for Interior Design and Scenography, was the Sofia monument, 1300 years of Bulgaria, that I thought it would be worthwhile to be discussed by 7 students, all of them here, together with Valentina Ganeva from the New University of Sofia, who was our host and mentor, and almost in the center with a blue shirt, I mean, all of you locals know him, but we foreigners might not know him, Valentin Starchev, the sculptor of the monument. So, the Institute of Interior Design and Scenography is located in Basel, so this is our headquarters and this is our studios. It's a campus traditionally, and I try to intrigue my students, our students, with social scenography. So, happenings, events, designs that are integrating the public, like here. It's a light, spectacular event in Binningen. This is a suburb of Basel, whereas the students' concept involved 3,000 local people to attend this event. It's a light festival, and all the ideas that you can see here were designed and executed by the students. So one of the remarkable ones here, this projection, very simple, all low budget, very low budget, a projection onto a facade of a small or short skyscraper. Not the only one. I just brought 2 examples with me. This is not only the building or the physical matter that I try to let the students discuss in their designs. It's also about invisible senses that should be triggered, like sound. Here, this is a project that we did on Pink Floyd. So 3 years ago, Pink Floyd had its 50th anniversary. We took this advantage and let the students design according to compositions to songs of Pink Floyd. So this was one, the song of silence, so you couldn't hear anything, but everybody heard the sound of silence, the piece that was composed by Pink Floyd. Or this, so this was an animation projected here in a silo-like building. It was moving accordingly to the sound patterns and sound notes of the composition. Or a multi-scattered mirror, you know this system where the great gig was interpreted. So this is an instrumental with one soprano voice composed by Pink Floyd. Why do I show this to you? Because I think that the monuments could be perceived completely differently by converting them or by uploading them. I call this uploading. Usually monuments are meant to be downloaders. So we go there and the monuments are dedicated or designed or intended to tell me a story or a message. But if this message is not connected to the younger generation anymore, so what should we do? I think youngsters and the recent and the next generation will perceive these monuments completely differently. And this is the chance for them to survive. So this is the period of uploading. So we can load up meaning, interpretation onto these monuments, even if they were scattered with ugly messages. A good monument can stand it, can keep it, and can talk back or fight back if we want so. So I don't want to stretch out and spoil my time with showing you things that you know better, but for me it was a fascinating approach to your legacy. I was completely overwhelmed by the monuments. I think I meanwhile visited 5 of them, and it was always something like a wow effect for me coming from southwest Germany, from Stuttgart, to see how the monuments are sort of conveying their messages or their aura to the environment and to the people. And during the lunchtime we talked about irony and humor with Alexander, and he was quoting the Greek philosophers. Maybe we don't need the Greek philosophers within every monument, but I think it's worthwhile to keep it, because if it's torn down, if it's taken away, it only remains or survives on paper, and that's very sad, because the common denominator of all these fascinating sculptures is the monumental aspect, is the brutalism, is the concrete that you won't find in the western part of Europe anywhere, except the protection wall of the Nazis along the shore coast to the Atlantic and to the North Sea. One of my favorites, of course, is the Buzluja. Did I pronounce this correct? Buzluja. So what you see here is, therefore I show it, is a picture out of the book of Nicola Mihov. Mihov? Yes. Right, correct pronounced. And what you see is here. Forget your past. This was the most remarkable thing that I discovered on this photograph. I will tell you later why. Already the approach is something exciting, so those who will attend the excursion tomorrow will see this, can feel it. I think it's not always only seeing, it's feeling. And the entire approach to get closer and closer to the monument becomes always a different attitude, a different character, a different aura here. And this was in 2015 when we were there. And you see, this was a regular day, like Monday or Tuesday. And I counted as in the time that we were there, this was about 1.5 hours, more than 300 people coming up, 300 visitors. And it's completely remote. I mean, it takes 2.5 hours to get there by a car, and there's no infrastructure around. And of course, for an architect, especially for a stage designer like me, so this ruin, or this fractalized body of the building is even more attractive than it would be entire. And there's still some messages, and reminds me on my time when I was a young student, and I was a socialist fighter, so this was very fashionable in the 1970s in Germany. And of course we were carrying a little Mao Bible here, always on the heart, according to the mystery that protects you from bullets, addressing your heart. So this is just a personal thing, but more of that is the fascination of the aura of the building. Even if it's broken in, if it's devastated, and it's not complete. And the most exciting thing on Bus Luja is the different messages that you can find everywhere. So there was a need of expressing oneself. This, what I mean, is uploading. So there are young people or foreigners or whoever coming and leaving their traces that sometimes funny, sometimes ironic, sometimes very personal, but at least the effect that it's there on this historic building tells me that there is an interaction between the spectators, the visitors, and the original meaning. Let's see and go through some of the monuments in Germany that I found in all of those are of my private collection. So usually I don't take things from the internet if I was not there personally. Just opposite of Karl Marx's portrait is the new archaeological museum, State Archaeological Museum of Saxonia in Chemnitz. So this is in Chemnitz. Earlier Karl Marx Stadt, Jörg. Another example of the altering of the name after the end of the Cold War, after the Berlin Wall fell. So it's the Karl Marx monument in Chemnitz that was thought, and I mean, this facade behind belongs to it. So this is actually via this facade and the text on it, you can decipher it. Actually, this portrait was meant to be dismantled. And for heaven's sake, the people of Chemnitz said, no, we would miss something. What would come instead? Because they didn't want to change the facade in the background. So again, you see, uploading and downloading. Without the portrait in front, the facade would be just useless, senseless, and vice versa. So things play together. Monuments and their environment have a strong relationship, what I call contextualization. A very controversial thing happened just recently. So these photos are only 1 week old. There was for Karl Marx anniversary. This sculpture was donated. It was a donation from the Chinese government for the city of Trier, a statue of Karl Marx, an original one. And it was positioned and it was inaugurated with a real event, with an event that went through the entire Republic. And on the right-hand side, you see immediately 1 or 2 days later, we had these protests happening to pull it down again, and it says victims of communism. You see the skeletons and the skeletons under his portrait. So this is a double portrait on this poster, and the discussion did not end yet, so it's an ongoing discussion. Can we do this? Can we position people like Karl Marx, Engels, or others, the Stalin we heard this morning, in the public without reaction? I think the reaction is perfect. If it wouldn't be there, no discussion would happen. I think it was a very democratic gesture that happened by the city government of Trier to keep it, and meanwhile to protect it, because it was violated already. So I think everybody knows these guys. They are in Berlin, facing east, by the way. That matters. If things facing east or west in Berlin. Actually, one of the first monuments or sculptures I saw when the wall fell. And it became a quite famous, something like a public icon for formerly East Berlin or East Germany. And what you see here is the occupation with artistic interventions or even commercial interventions. So what you can see is that they plaster Marx and Engels with paper and redress them completely. Actually, this was done for a commercial purpose. So this was not a political statement, but just a commercial abuse of this monument. It's only allowed to do work on this monument if you leave it back as it was before. I think it's also a very democratic thing. So it's not damaged, it's just used temporarily. And even if you call it abused or transferred, I think the guys can stand it. They are still there, and only one day after they look as if nothing would have happened. Actually, from there you can't see that the wall was torn down, only by the fashion and the dressed people of today. Another example for me, a very smart one, again, a very sophisticated one, is the Lenin Memorial from Dresden, which was supposed to be torn down, and then an artist came, namely Rudolf Herz, who had the idea to let the sculpture travel all over Europe. So they were dismantled and put on a truck, and the truck is running throughout Europe, as you can see on the left-hand side, even to in front of the Cologne Dome, or to the Gotthard Pass. This is this one. Yeah. So, which is a reinterpretation and a recontextualization in one. Yeah, because the ideas of the guys were traveling formerly. Now the guys are traveling because the ideas are outworn. And I think this is a contribution, a very artistic contribution to involve the people in a public discussion. And another remarkable example is the Soviet War Memorial in Berlin. The monument was built in the British sector, by the way, after the Berlin Wall was erected in 1961. And the monument was seen as a sign of communist provocation on Western Berlin soil, and had to be protected, by the way, very long, by the West Berlin and British soldiers. So there were always soldiers, and I knew it from the 1970s when I visited Berlin regularly, that there was always soldiers standing in front of their positioning themselves between the public and the monument. And there was a petition to the Bundestag, so to the national government, to remove the Soviet tanks from the memorial site as a response to the Crimean crisis, the Crim island crisis in 2014, calling them a martial war symbol and demonstration of Russia. But the petition was subsequently denied by the German federal government, and it's still the same. I think this was also a very sovereign decision by our government to keep it, because it's part of our heritage. And actually now it's even more effectful because now we have a common German ground, and the perception and the uploaded meaning changed after the Berlin Wall fell. One of my favorite examples, of course, is the Brandenburger Tor. And you see this is a recent picture, I think, from winter 2017. And this is how it looked during the Cold War. And if you did not get the detail right, you see the horses changed several times the direction. So this is the horses how it were originally placed. This is the horses as they were placed during the German Democratic Republic, because then they were facing east. All the monuments, the respected monument were facing east, including what Jörg said this morning, the LA that went to the east. What was the LA? The Marx LA? Yeah, Marx, yeah. So, but uploading and downloading means that the monument can change its attitude and impact suddenly, almost overnight. So this is the Brandenburger Tor just a few days before the wall fell, controlled by the national power, and this is how it looked like a few days later. So a real monument can stand it. It will change its meaning and its power and its potential from time to time and from generation to generation. And I think all of you know the Brandenburger Tor and other places in the world being used as part of happenings, for example, or contributions, political statements like solidarity to the terrorist attacks in France, Israel, or Great Britain. Again, this is a completely new meaning of one and the same monument. And you see, one of my ideas was once to put the horses on a turntable so that we can turn it according to its use or abuse. Another example that I don't want to miss to mention, although you heard it this morning already, this is Berlin-Hohenschönhausen, the memorial, the building that was the former Stasi prison, so the secret service of the German Democratic Republic. You see it from the outside. And the most exciting thing to me was, and I would like to quote the former director of the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum in Tel Aviv, who was a consultant for the House of History in Stuttgart that I showed you briefly before. And he was our consultant, and he once said to me, Uwe, you must know, you have to design the evil as attractive as the light, the positive. So our duty, our task of us designers and artists, we have to take care that the dark side of the metal is as attractive as the bright side. Why? Because we want to cause attention. We want to provoke awareness. We want to trigger emotions. And we want to convey something either to prevent people from doing the failures of the past, or to start initiatives into the future. And you see, this is on the left-hand side. You see this person here. He was a former prisoner, and he became a guide. And this is Guskin, dear people. This is Guskin. Yeah, and you see, even Mrs. Merkel was deeply impressed, because from the outside, I'm sure that one of the guides was talking out of his or her experience in this prison, with all tortures you can think of on German ground, post-war prison. And this was our guide, and he was imprisoned in this cell. Actually, it's a slant plank and nothing else in, so you cannot stand there or sit. You're always sort of sliding down. You either have to stand there all the time, or to hold yourself with the nails in the little gaps of the wooden boards. So, for me, one of the most authentic places. It's not about the exhibition that you can find there, but the authentic experience, the legacy that is transported by a real person that went through all these negative experience before. And he did it quite cool. He said, I am not thinking of revenge. He knows some of his torturers. So the guards who tortured him. He said one of them lives only 3 blocks further from his home. But he accepted it as part of his heritage and the heritage of our nation. So whenever you go to Berlin, go to Hohenschönhausen, and make sure that you get a guide, not one born after, but one who can tell you authentically what happened in this dark period of the German Stasi history. So the next one was already mentioned in the morning, but it's not a doubling, because I want to focus on from a completely different point of view. So today's topography of terror site once housed the Gestapo headquarters, the office of Heinrich Himmler, Reinhard Heydrich, and other Nazi officials, and it was one of the most deadly places. By the way, Jörg already mentioned it in the morning. It was the place where all the transport were designed, as they call it. So the transport of the Jewish, German, and other Jewish people from all over Europe to Auschwitz, Dachau, and other places. So from 1933 to 1945, the Gestapo had their in-house prison on the site, and these are the remainings of the cells. And this is another aspect. So I was asked several times during lunchtime and before, what shall we do with the monuments that have blood on their surface, or on their facade, or on the shown figures or characters that were included in the monuments? I think we only can decipher it by letting the people know what the real background was. And it's very simple, it's affordable, I think it's necessary, and then we can let the rest of the monument to the interpretation of the next younger generation. Also worthwhile to go to this place while you are in Berlin. So the so-called East Side Gallery, or the Wall Museum in Berlin, is the effort to sort of reincarnate what was dismantled too early and too complete. So most of the authorities, and of course many tourists and many citizens of Berlin, they deeply regret that the wall was dismantled more than 90%,
yes.
Or 95%?
95%.
95%. So there's only a few places left. This is here, and what you see is a smart intervention, an artistic or architectural intervention, sort of to reincarnate a sort of the wall. But now, with a smart trick, I think it's also like a reinterpretation by these steel poles, or sometimes they use the rails that you use for controlling. So they had these controlling little cabins running on the east side of the wall, so rails or poles used in the eastern sector. A wall which looks like a wall, but rather works like a permeable membrane. Now you see interpretation of the wall. It's not a solid wall anymore to prevent people from fleeing from east to west, or from penetrating from west to east. Now, no, it's not meant to be a wall of segregation. It's meant to be a wall of that might be still in your mind, in your heads, and to overcome it by making it permeable. This is the idea, and there's even more artistic approach. So for 25 years of the fall of the wall, colleagues from White Void, light designers, sort of rebuilt the wall by LED balloons. There exactly, I don't know how many kilometers, 25 kilometers, to symbolize that the wall was running exactly in front here of the Brandenburger Tor again, and to other sectors. Again, I think a very smart idea to discuss in public the things that happened in our history. A more commercial approach to it, I mean, you also can make money out of the wall. Many organizations do, especially Yadigar Assisi, here with his Berlin Wall panorama. So you have a projection there, and you can witness how the wall was built and how it was torn down in a 360 degrees panorama. Of course, you have to pay for it. You don't have to pay for this memorial. I think one of the best in the world that I ever visited, which was designed by Peter Eisenheim and opened in 2005. By the way, it's a so-called hybrid memorial. Officially it's called Holocaust Memorial, but it also hosts a museum underneath that we briefly will see. And I think if it's a proper memorial, this is not offense to the memorial. If you accept it as something that, like your neighborhood, and if you then invade it, and you see, this first picture was taken from here, and this is exactly the opposite way. So you're going down to somewhere, you're going down into the dark, you're going down into the shadow. So the entire memorial is thought over to create a parcours, a route that automatically puts pressure on you, that automatically intrigues you with meaning and with contradictions. So happens to more than I think there's more than 1 million visitors per year that are introduced to go to the museum underneath. And you see how smartly it's done. So what is extruded on the top, you still can read underneath in the ceiling. Yeah. So the stairs above the ground are negatively extruded here, and exactly the projection of it is donated to some of the 6 million Jewish killed by Nazi Germany in this period. I think this is a good example for this connectivity, with the contextualization, with the deciphering of the dark side of the metal of a memorial or a monument. A similar intention is the documentation center of the Reichstaggelände in Nuremberg. So Nuremberg, very famous for the trial the Nazi trial after the Second World War. And this Reichstagsgelände is one of the major expressions of Hitler. So Hitler, there was only a few monuments that were showing him personally as a figure, but he expressed himself via architecture. And one of these architecture was the so-called Reichstagsgelände. And what you see is an intervention, so a cut in. This was a wound, an intended wound to this building by architect Günther Domenik, an Austrian architect, who used this wound as the entrance. So you're entering through the wound of the body of this Nazi Germany Reichstagsgelände in Nuremberg. I think this is a very proper gesture in challenging our heritage. And inside, it's a new counterbalanced architecture in a historic environment. So you see the historic walls here, so some cutouts to insert the new staircase, and the staircase is sort of counterbalancing, is intriguing the historic site with a modern architecture that is controversial and never orthogonal. It's always cutting in a certain angle. And some of the critics already also called this wound, what I call wound, so this scarf into the building, as a bullet that was going into the building and hurting this dark side of our legacy. With different layers in the inside of relics, like the original was, the photographs, which are also somehow authentic footage, and with an objective curatorship. So it's very reserved, and if you go there, if you go to Nuremberg and visit the site, you will see that the textile curatorship is very, very precise, decisive, distinguished, and objective. So there's no killer, no victim. It's all about things that came over us or were caused in our past, at least for my generation. Finally, I want to show you a project that is even not built yet. And we are not sure that it's going to be built. So 1 week we read in the newspaper that it's going to be built, the next one that it's been skipped, and the next one is said that it's definitely being built, the money is there, and the next one is a new government in place, and nobody knows what happens to it. So this is intended, or it was in a competition, it was the first prize of a competition, for a Freiheits- und Einheitsdenkmal dedicated to the German unification. Disrespectfully called the unification rocker or swing. So actually it's like a swing, and the idea is if many people gather here, so it will lift up on this side. If there's more people on this side, it will lift on the other side. So it's actually next to the new Humboldt Forum, which is also a very discussable new monument. Actually, it's a cultural monument in Berlin. It's about to be finished. I think in 1.5 years they are intending to open it. But this is another story. So a monument that is not yet built, but already in the discussion that we are having today about monuments that are now 40, 50 or 100 years old. So, quickly, when we came to Sofia some 4 years ago, and I was introduced to the monument, it was during our European research project. Within we collaborated with the National Museum of Bulgaria here in Sofia, and I was introduced to this monument, and I thought this is worthwhile to put it on a list for a diploma theme, for a thesis design. Therefore, I did so. In 2015 it became the diploma theme, and we went to Sofia. You see here the students again, you know this picture, and we were asking us about what is a monument, or is it a memorial or an urban statement? If a monument falls apart, should it be restored, demolished, transformed into something new? All questions that were raised in the brief for the diploma thesis. And for that, we initiated a 3 days workshop hosted by Valentina in the new University of Sofia. And we invited Valentin Starchev, as you can see, and he was talking out of his experience, how he designed the monuments. There were 3 of them at the original beginning, and so on, and it was fascinating. And he also invited us to his studio, where you still could find some sculptures, some new ones, but also some smaller models of the monuments. And according to him, it was dedicated, his monument was dedicated to the people of Bulgaria rather than to a political system. Also, he was under oppression. Then the next step was that we entered this building. I don't know if it was legal or not, but we spent an entire day there, and all the students went down to the monument and try to find out what the atmosphere was and what they could make out of it. And the question was, what are the potentials of the sculpture and the location? How could it be converted in something new by keeping the character and the charm of the monument? A question that I wanted to be discussed by a generation that was born after the Communist Party was put into the place of power. We also ask ourselves, is the meaning of the monument today still the same? How is it used, and what is the option for the inhabitants? The task was to transform the monument of 1300 years of Bulgaria into a present use with the individual concept. And 7 students attended, and I quickly show you some of the results. For example, Mark Eichenberger, he was one of 2 who dismantled the building and put in a residential place for artists. So this was his concept, to cut it down to this shape. And in this shape, in the hollow inside, he proposed to have living rooms and atelier for artists and residents there, that international artists to be invited to work on the site, and even if it would have happened to reincarnate or to rebuild the monument. This was his idea. Another idea coming from Raphael Fuchs was to reinterpret the monument and the site on the monument as an event space, so with this scaffolding, and the scaffolding could have changed and used for various actions, and of course the surface of the monument as a cinema or as a large screen using for interventions every year, so an annual event being set up in Sofia with a core object, the monument in the center. An interesting proposal to me, which also is a hybrid, comes from Michelle Heidegger, and in the model you easily can see what she did. So she put a glass roof over the excavated basement with a door. When it's open, it invites the people. If it's closed, it's closed. It's very simple. You can walk over it. And in the inside, there's a veritable exhibition, an exhibition about this monument and all the other monuments I showed you before. So I think this would have been a reasonable concept that could have easily been built within a reasonable budget, because the architecture interventions are normal anyway. If you would have used or reused the building, it would have been a regular thing to do so. Another example by Rebecca Schneider was to cover the entire monument in a way, or like Christa would have done. I don't know if he intended to do so, but she intended to do so, and to use it as a mega screen, so to convert the outfit, the skin, the body of the monument to a mega screen, and let have happenings here on projections on, as you could see in the first image, she presented it in the way with real projections on the model. Samuel Stressler, he intended to have to convert it to a workshop place. So his proposal was to have a pavilion there for students to work on interventions, and what he proposed was a sort of staircase. You see here, ramp and staircase to make the monument accessible. He wanted to let the people walk on top and look over the park from there, and in the background you see this pavilion, and the pavilion was meant to be mobile, so you could have shifted the pavilion to some other places if necessary, always with a big window facing to the monument. Another exciting, oops, sorry, something went wrong. It was too fast. Yeah, so another exciting example was Nela Weber, who wanted to give access to the visitors from the inside, because the entire monument is hollow. So there's a open space in there, and she wanted to integrate there a parcours of an exhibition parcours. You see, this is this spiral staircase she proposed to get up to this tower-like top, not the very top, because this was made of iron scaffolding, but the top of the concrete slab. Also a recommendable proposal, what I, according to my perception, to be realized. Unfortunately, it's not existing anymore, and this was the presentation. We also did a presentation here in Sofia, by the way, with the models. So this is Nela with the covering of the site, including the exhibition down below. But it was not only our students that were involved, thinking about to convert the monument. So this is a proposal coming from the Bulgarian architect Julian Manev, with the title 681, which was the inauguration of Bulgaria, so the creation or the foundation of the Bulgarian state, and it provides a new way of looking at what we have. It is not a destructive way, but a constructive way, as he called it, inclusive rather than exclusive, cohesive rather than divisive. So I'm just quoting from his website, and he also proposed an underground monument exhibition area that would enhance for the first time and make it accessible from all sides. And he also proposed an additional building, not opposite, but on the side. You can see it here. And here, this is that natural staircase that is already existing, so an extension to the monument to host various activities there. There was another initiative, unfortunately not successful, that was also supported by a group of designers from Germany. So Transformatori, the association Transformatori, who started a internet proposal platform in 2012, organized own staging there with 3D mapping performances. One was called Revision, and this is one of the results. Yeah, so funny projection on it. Of course, I cannot interpret what the guys are talking there. So this was also with sound and projections, and it showed a huge amount of public attending these events. But I don't want to stay in the conjunctive. I want to look forward. Forward looking means also to fight for one's ideas. Again, action that was initiated by Delcho Delchev and from the Transformatory. So this was organizing this protest against the monuments dismantling. And the most interesting point for me, I wasn't here personally, so I was fed with images and with films via the internet. So I was taking part in this sad event over the distance. But remarkable for me was that this protest movement obviously was attended by many young people to preserve the monument from the communistic area, although they haven't been born at that time. Yeah. Isn't that remarkable? So that especially young people were trying to keep the monument who were born after the communist area, and I think this is said that this was not.
I think it's quite logical.
Yeah. Good. So we have another follower here with the president of the Goethe Institute. Yeah. But I question myself the same question. Is this an anachronism? The protest did not influence the progress to stop the demolition of the Sofia monument, but actually it's not really an anachronism. Enzo already answered my rhetoric question. It's rather logical. It's logical because if we follow, you remember the quotation at the beginning, forget your past, and this is the new one, never forget your past. You see, in the same position. So 30 minutes earlier, I showed you the quotation, forget your past. And 30 minutes later, or maybe 3 months later, you can read, never forget your past. So if we follow Siri Hustvedt saying, there is no future without past, we are very close to at least the intention to keep some of the monuments and give them the chance and the opportunity, especially to the young next generation, to interpret them in a completely new way. Thank you very much.